In dieser Episode des Podcasts spreche ich mit Aaron Rabinowitz, mit meinem schlechten Englisch, über das Phänomen des, ganz stupide übersetzt, moralischen Glücks. Eine deutsche Zusammenfassung für alle, die entweder kein Englisch können oder sich mein Englisch nicht antun wollen, würde es am Ende noch zusätzlich geben. Wenn ihr diesen Podcast unterstützen wollt oder bei dem Gast vorbeischauen wollt, dann schaut doch mal in die Beschreibung. Mit diesen Worten, viel Spaß! Welcome back, everyone. Today, in the 17th episode of the podcast, we have a very special guest. He's the person or entity behind one of my favorite podcasts, and I think he can introduce himself a bit, if that's okay for you.
Sure. My name is Aaron Rabinowitz. I teach at Rutgers University and do Embrace the Void podcast and the Philosophers in Space podcast, and generally hang around social medias trying to get people to argue about philosophy.
Great. So today's topic will be moral luck, because a lot of the viewers wanted me to talk about it, and that's not really my specialty. But as far as I'm aware, you have thought quite a bit about the topic. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm certainly obsessed with the topic. I don't know if I have anything particularly insightful or useful to say about it, but I can certainly explain why I'm obsessed with it.
Great. I think that would be even better than just saying something very important.
Fair enough.
Yeah. No, because I think if you are able to motivate some viewers to think about the topic, I think that will have a more positive outcome than if you just say something that would finish the whole topic for the viewer. Okay, so just before we really get into the topic, I have to do something that I always do. I always have a different drink in the show. It's a really boring drink, as always. Today I have the star drink. It's orange, zero sugar, just so that everyone knows and can be aware of me annoying them with the sounds of me drinking. Do you have anything to drink on your end?
So over here it's 11 a.m. So I'm sticking with water at the moment. Depending on what particular podcast I'm recording and what the content is, that can scale up in various ways towards whiskey.
Okay, great. So I guess we could just start. So the first question would be what moral luck is, or what moral luck means. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so moral luck refers to situations where a person is held morally responsible for something that is beyond their control. So in contexts where someone is seen as guilty of a crime and punished for doing that crime, even though it seems like the fact that they did that crime was beyond their control in some important way, would be the sort of classic examples of moral luck. And the view that I hold is that pretty much all moral judgments are cases of moral luck, because everything is entirely the result of luck. Everything is just luck all the way down. And so that raises real problems for someone like me, who also believes that moral judgments are real and true and apply objectively, and that we should care about them. So how one reconciles those two things, that's a really tricky dance. But I think go ahead.
Yeah, on that note, I just have a question on your definition of luck. So what would you define as luck?
Yeah, and so this gets a little tricky to avoid kind of circularities here, but I think luck refers to things that are beyond our control. So the sort of textbook examples that we can think of are, you know, if you're playing a video game or something that has a random number generator in it, right? It rolls a number that you have no control over, and that element of luck, you know, shapes the way that the game is played, or how these kind of games work, right? So, you know, other examples of, you know, would be really cases of really good or really bad luck, right? You happen to be born into a family where you inherit massive amounts of wealth versus being born into an abusive household, for example. Right? These are things that I think there's lots of things that we can reasonably say are beyond people's control. Those are the things that I think of as, you know, the features of the world that are luck, in relation to me and in relation to other entities. And then the hard jump is, and everything counts as luck, right? And like all of the things are things that are beyond your control in an important sense.
Okay, so that actually was one thing that was quite problematic for me when I first read about it, because to me, it seems like a problem that I also have with determinism or fatalism. Mm-hmm. Because in a certain way, if you can apply this concept to absolutely everything, it seems to me very trivial. Like the meaning, it in a certain sense destroys its own meaning, its own impact, because it cannot not apply.
Well, so there's a tension, right, between universality and triviality, right? Like, we have a similar sort of thing in ethics, I think, where, you know, you want your moral judgments to be, or your moral premises to be universal. You want them to apply to everyone in all situations, in all contexts. And if they don't, that can seem problematic. But then some folks will argue the flip side of that is you end up with moral principles that are incredibly trivial in some kind of way. And then the hard work becomes teasing out if there really is anything that this adds to the conversation. Now, here's why I don't think that this is trivial, is because I think a lot actually really does hang on whether or not everything is beyond our control or not. If it's true that certain things are under our control and certain things aren't, that's going to have really important implications for how we shape society, how we treat good people and bad people. So I don't think that we can say that this is trivial merely in virtue of the fact that my position is to argue that everything qualifies as luck, because I think that is a substantive claim that has, you know, substantial implications. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. But I'm wondering if it is really that important, if it would actually, let's say you're absolutely correct. Okay. But would it really change anything in the way of how we experience the world, how we experience moral dilemmas and so on?
I absolutely think so. I think that there really is a genuine tension, because, so here's why. The moral luck problem, and Nagel, I think, does a great job explaining this, arises because of a natural feature of morality, which is that we do think that people should only be held morally responsible for things that are under their control. That's a natural condition for moral judgments, right? If someone took over your body and went on a killing spree with your body, we wouldn't think that you should be held morally responsible for that killing spree. So I do think it's important, and where we see the implications in the real world would be in things like how we structure our judicial system. This is the go-to example, is that, like, if you think that human beings have a choice and what they did was wrong and they did it knowing that it was wrong and that they deserve to be punished for that, you can build a kind of a kind of retributive model for justice and say, you know, bad people should go to jail because they deserve to be punished. If you buy my view, right, it becomes much harder to make any sense of the idea that people deserve to suffer in any kind of way, and that if you're going to have a prison system, which I still think you need in some form, you're going to have to base it on rehabilitative kinds of principles, restorative kinds of principles, deterrence kinds of principles, rather than a retributive kind of system. And that'll have implications for how you build that model, how cruel it is, how, what things you allow your prisoners to do during the times that they are in prison, stuff like that. So I think it definitely has real applied ethics downstream implications. And on the personal level, a lot of us build our sense of, I think all of us, whether we, you could try to resist it some, but like it's a natural feeling to build your sense of self on your accomplishments and failures, that like these are the things that define you. And so I think one reason that people are very uncomfortable with this idea that everything is luck is that they feel like their sense of self slips away, and it does. And like, part of the reality of recognizing moral luck is recognizing that there is no free will in a robust sense, and with it, no robust sense of the separate self that deserves, a bunch of accolades for doing the right thing. So I think, it has lots and lots of implications.
So it's great that you mentioned free will, because I was actually wondering if there really was a difference on a systematic argumentative level between the debate on free will and determinism and moral luck. Do you think that there is any significance?
I mean, I think that they're all connected here, right? I think what we're saying here is determinism is true, and it's true for sentient beings just as much as it's true for non-sentient beings. And as a result, moral luck is pervasive because luck is pervasive, and we continue to make moral judgments. So this is a fundamental problem, and it is a problem because human beings don't have free will in the robust kind of sense that we want to think that they do. That you're just not the author of your actions in the way that would be necessary for it to be true that you did something wrong in a way that was radically independent, and so should be punished in a retributive kind of way.
Okay, because to me it was kind of confusing, because when you take a look at the arguments how determinism works and how moral luck works, they seem to me to work on two different levels. Determinism is trying to argue from the position of the thing in itself, if you would like to make this distinction. And moral luck is more arguing from the first person perspective, it seems to me, because luck seems to be a rather strange category when it comes to determinism.
Well, so I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because the moral luck paper that you read is in Nagel's book, Mortal Questions, and he sort of views the unifying problem of that book, of which moral luck is one version of the problem, as an unresolvable tension between the subjective way of seeing the world from our inside first-person perspective, and an objective account of the world as seen from the view from nowhere. And basically the problem is, right, maybe debatably, from our subjective point of view, we can't help but see ourselves as free. Actually, I don't fully believe that, but I think Nagel probably did, or he says that he does at the end of Moral Luck. And so some folks are really concerned that there's no livable way to fully deny the idea of free will, to deny the idea of the independent, subjectively experiencing self, to reduce it down to the purely objective. And I think there are ways in which they're correct about that with regard to phenomenal consciousness, but not with regard to free will. I think that the reality is we are just parts of the large, radically interconnected system of causal events. I want to also address your point in terms of unpacking a little bit more the features of moral luck that Nagel puts forward, because you're right that some of them aren't put in this necessarily strictly determinist way, though I think that they are just sort of unpacking forms of determinism. So he lays out 4 different kinds of luck. He talks about luck of consequences, luck of how your actions turn out, right? He talks about luck of circumstances, what situations that you are facing in your life. He talks about luck of constitution, which I think is the most important, the one that he talks about, and that's the one that really undermines free will in a robust sense. And that's the luck of what makes you who you are, what the features that you happen to have. And then there's a fourth one which often gets dropped out because it's probably exhaustively accounted for by the other ones, which is essentially the luck of antecedent circumstances, which is to say, every events are the result of prior events. And so that one is basically just determinism, right? It's just saying, we are part of the deterministic framework. But the value of his argument is the unpacking of that in terms of the nature of constitutive luck and how it erases any room for an independent, freely acting self.
Okay. So you already answered the question of different types.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. I think it's good that there's a dynamic in this discussion. Mm-hmm. Do you yourself think that there are any epistemic problems, any serious epistemic problems with this position?
Well, yes and no, I guess, is my answer to that question, right? I think there are massive epistemic problems whenever you're talking about conscious sentient beings and what they are experiencing or not experiencing. I've been wrestling myself with this question of, do I have, I can tell you, I believe that I am not a free agent, right? I do not have free will, but I'm mouthing those words to you. Do I know that I actually believe that? Or is there some part of me that still clings to the idea that I am actually free? There are some people who will argue that, I am committed in every action to still believing that I am free in some kind of way. I don't necessarily think that's true from a logical, argumentative side, but there's also the psychological question of, am I still clinging to this habituated idea that I am a free, separate entity when I go around continuing to enact behaviors that are things like praising and blaming other people, because I will still go around and say, great job for doing that other thing, right? I think that I can make reasonably explain why I'm doing that without appealing to personal freedom, but it is a habit that is associated with that, and so we are creatures of habit. That's part of the whole argument here. So it may just be part of my luck that I will continue to always believe that I'm free, even when I have solid arguments I think that I am not. If that were true, that would be really unfortunate, right? Because that's like saying you're stuck believing false things that you know are false, which we hope is not the case, but that could be the bad luck that a person has. And I'm not even sure how I prove either to myself or to other people that I genuinely have adopted this belief. So that's about as big an epistemic problem as that you can get, right? You don't even know if you're holding a belief or whether you can prove it to yourself or anyone. I think that I have reasonably good reasons to think that I have adopted the no control, no free will view. I'm not convinced that I have any good way to convey that to anyone else in a convincing fashion if they don't sort of also buy my no free will view and then sort of infer that I'm really genuinely believing it. So that's one major problem, right? I guess. Other problems are, of course, I can't prove that none of you are free, and it's not just me that's the freak here, right? That's another major problem here. But I think the argument is sound. I think there's no way to point to anything that anyone does that isn't incredibly coded in luck and just luck all the way through. So,
would you then agree that you have to presuppose certain positions concerning, for example, the construction of reality, how reality at its basis is built, some ontological presuppositions for that?
I mean, so I guess it's possible.
Or just on the topic of...
Sorry?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just on the topic, for example, of the philosophy of science, for example, because it for me it's just like most deterministic accounts nowadays. It really sounds like an argument from the point of view of science, or something that is approaching science methodologically.
Well, I do think it is I think it is an argument bolstered by empirical evidence, but I also think that it's an argument that can be done without appeals to science. I think you could give a philosophical argument that isn't empirical in nature, or fundamentally empirical in nature. Maybe it's a synthetic a priori kind of thing, but I think it is the case that we have an argument for this that isn't just assuming certain things about the nature of reality any more than like any other argument is, right? Like, I think you can have radical skeptical concerns about all our beliefs. Like, if the universe turns out to just not be a consistently behaving thing, then like everything's out the window. But like, I think we have good reason to think that the universe behaves according to consistent patterns, and that determinism is the view that like those consistent patterns involve some sorts of stable relations between things, and that once you have that, the problems arise pretty much immediately. So I don't think that it's presupposing anything that is implausible. I think it's presupposing things that are essential for the universe as we experience it being the way that we experience it in a Kantian kind of sense.
Okay. So, to take a step back for everyone who's listening and who's trying to get into the topic, where should one start to read, for example?
Yeah, so I would start with the Nagel paper. I think Thomas Nagel's Moral Luck paper is, and you can get it, it's easy to find, Google online, is short. It's a little hard language. It's not the easiest philosophy language ever, but it's also not the hardest philosophy language either. And I think that some of his prose are quite eloquent in laying out the problem, especially like the parts about 2/3 of the way through where he talks about how when you really take into account constitutive luck and how everything about you is the result of factors beyond your control, and therefore every action that you engage in is the result of factors beyond your control. He talks about how this shrinks the space of the self to an extensionless point, and I think that that's a really beautiful way of describing how the problem works. So I think the Nagel paper is really good. And then, there's various kinds of analysis of this, but I don't think that anyone has really resolved the problem that he lays out in that particular paper. So I think you mentioned, right, you went and read the paper before that, which is the Williams paper, which I think is good, but I don't think goes as far as the Nagel paper. And
Absolutely,
then, sorry?
Absolutely, I totally agree.
Yeah, and then there's like one or two individuals who's I'm blanking on the names, but I can get you for the show notes if you want, who've written like books about luck, who take, I think, different views than me generally in terms of trying to find trying to find a way to claim that everything isn't the result of luck rather than biting the bullet the way that I do. I don't know of anyone who's out there who's really willing to go. I don't know of a lot of people out there who are going as all in as I am on this particular side of things. I'm sure there are people out there who do take a similar view, though.
Okay, great. Yeah, would be absolutely great if you could send me those names. Okay, so I just have something left. I found a definition of luck on the topic that I thought was fairly interesting, and I wanted to hear your opinion on it. Maybe you have already heard of it, maybe not. From I hope I pronounce his name correctly, Nicholas Reschers. And I'll summarize it like this: something is luck when it is the result of an unplanned event or that the result itself is unexpected, plus the result has a significant evaluative status in representing a good or bad result. So in terms of a benefit or a loss.
So, yeah, so there's a couple of features in there. So let's go. Could you go back through it one more time, just real slow?
Sure.
And I just want to take them apart.
Something is luck when it is the result of an unplanned event or that the result itself is unexpected. Plus, the result
All right, so let's hold there for 1 second, right? So I don't know if he's going to say that we need all of these features, but I'm not sure why either. I'm not convinced that either of those features is necessarily essential for luck. So, like, I think that an event that is planned can still be the result of luck if the planning process is itself tainted by luck in a sufficient kind of way, or if the mechanism that is then enacted, right? So if I plan to roll a die, right, the die result is still the result of luck, it seems like to me.
Yeah, and your decision to roll the die also, and so on and so on.
Right, and predictability seems to also, I think, be a bit of a red herring here in the sense that, you know, I think there can be incredibly predictable events that are still the result of factors beyond anyone's control, and so fall into the kind of luck that I have in mind here, right? I think yours and my behavior can be predictable and still the result of luck. So I'm not convinced that one makes sense either as a necessary condition. So, all right, go ahead. Why don't you the other half of it?
So, yeah. Plus, the result has a significant evaluative status in representing a good or bad result.
The result has a significant evaluative status. I'm not sure exactly what he means there. I guess I would need like an example to think about what he's trying to get at with that particular.
If something happened, some event took place, and either it can be understood as a benefit or a loss. I think that would summarize it.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think. I see. So so the criteria that he's putting in there is for it to count as luck, it has to be like a good thing or a bad thing, essentially.
Yeah, and you have to be able to evaluate it. I think that is also very important too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's necessarily true either, right? So either it's the case that everything is a good thing or a bad thing, in which case what he's saying is tautologically true, right? It isn't adding anything to the definition. Or if there are neutral events out there in the world, events that are neither good nor bad, I don't see why they would be any less the result of determinism and therefore any less the result of luck than, like, it seems like the sort of account of luck he's giving there is very similar to like an anthropomorphic kind of like luck as it pertains to my specific desired outcomes and goals. Whereas I think my definition of luck is a much thinner, you know, anything that is beyond one's control, where that's important because what is beyond one's control then does have significant implications when we consider morality.
Yeah, okay. I think that those were very good points on this attempt of a definition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard thing to define. And, like, there's tricky sort of weird circularity things about that I have to try to tease out in terms of what I say when I say, you know, everything is the result of luck because everything is the result of things beyond our control, where luck means, you know, sort of things beyond our control. But I do think that that's the right way to unpack luck, and I think Nagel makes a really good case for that as being sort of the right way to understand this when we are keeping in the front of our mind what is at stake here in terms of judgments of morality and judgments about the nature of the self.
Okay. I think we are almost done. That went faster than I expected.
Oh, that's no problem. If I may, if we have a little bit of extra time,
sure, we have a lot of extra time.
Yeah, well, there's a way that I try to make this argument to try to make it compelling for folks who have, you know, who might be sort of skeptical about this, because usually what the response I get is something along the lines of everybody agrees that a lot of things are the result of luck, but there's still a little part of you inside of you somewhere that is still making decisions, and that thing is somehow separate from, in the right kinds of ways, these endless chains of luck, and that's where free will still exists. That's where control still exists, right? There's this little person inside at the control panel kind of view. So I want to try to make a case against that for folks who may be sort of sitting in that particular place at the moment. And the way I like to do this is via sort of a Socratic dialogue, where I like to ask the person I'm talking to give an example. I don't know how convinced you are by my arguments at this point, but if you can remember a time when you weren't convinced by them, if you are, what you would point to as something in your life that is an action that you would say is beyond, it was under your control, right? That you would say you freely chose to do.
Okay, so first I want to say that when I presuppose a certain conception of a self, then I absolutely agree with you. The way that I understand the self does not have this homunculi that is able to control anything, but it leaves the possibility for an event that, how do you say it, overcomes the strict determinism of the real. But I would have to prepare the explanation for that, because it's not that easy for me to do this in English just spontaneously.
Sure, I understand. Yeah.
But if you take this position, then I would absolutely agree with you.
So, but for the sake of my argument, for people who maybe don't agree, is there an action that you would point to as being the sort of thing that you think should be counted as an argument against my position or evidence against my position?
Okay, I can try to come up with one. But I think that the hypothetical person in this dialogue could take any action as an example. So let's say I bought 3 apples instead of 2 because I wanted to. Yeah,
so you're right that I think almost any action can be put forward, and they usually, I think, actually get chunked into 2 categories. The one you gave would be kind of the trivial category, right? People think that like trivial small actions are independent in some kind of way, and then the other would be like big momentous actions that they think that they spend a lot of time deliberating on, for example, would be the other kind, where they think that they have some sort of control over them. And so the way I push back on these kind of examples is I ask them to apply a kind of regress to this, a regress of reasons, where I ask them to think, why did you pick the 3 apples instead of the 2 apples? Right?
Yeah, for example, I saw a tweet by Matonia, which motivated me to buy more apples. And
right. So one account could be, I can point to the thing that got me thinking about having one more apple or something like that, right? In which case the argument runs, it was luck that you happened to see that tweet versus not see that tweet, right? It wasn't under your control in some kind of way. And so the motivating causal force in your behavior was this thing that was clearly beyond your control. So that seems to reduce that down to an example of not freedom in the sense that I'm talking about in my framework. Or right, the other way this sometimes gets answered is, well, nothing caused it, right? There was absolutely nothing, right? Somebody will try to say there was no thing that made me pick 3 instead of 2. It just happened, right? And there it seems like maybe we can call that free, but I think the reality is that's still going to be a determined event. You may not be able to point to what it is.
Also, I wouldn't say that if nothing caused it, was really free.
Right, and we certainly wouldn't say it's an example of the kind of will that we have in mind when we say free will, right? We want our will to be driven by reasons, and we don't want to claim that our will is free merely because it can sometimes act, with no reason whatsoever. right? We want to be able to say our will has reasons, but we chose those reasons, and they are us, and that we can have, ownership of those reasons. So I don't think that kind of, I raised my left hand instead of my right hand is going to be the kind of case that people want to hang their free will arguments on. And I also think that they are pretty clearly still reducible to, causal effects, right? If I ask someone, prove to me that you have free will, and they raise their arm and say, I proved it by raising my hand, I would say, you raised your hand because you wanted some way to prove that prove to me that you had free will, and you in your mind, you were convinced that that would be sufficient evidence, and so you did that action caused by trying to want to prove to me that you have free will in that kind of way. So these regress problems, I think, arise for all of our actions, right? The big momentous choices, you can still ask, what was your reason for doing this big momentous thing? And they can, if they give the reason, you can then say, well, what about you? What about your constitutive luck made you such that you were susceptible to that reason and not all the other competing reasons, right? Let's say that you saved someone's life at some point, right? Like what caused you to do that kind of thing would be that you had been habituated to be the sort of person who would dive into the water and swim and save someone's life in that particular situation. You were lucky enough to have the physical capacity to do that physical event in that moment. All of these things come together to make it the case that you saved that person's life. And it's a good thing, right? It's morally good that you saved that person's life, but ultimately all of the things that contributed to that event were things that were beyond your control.
Yeah, I only have one question for the first answer, because to me it sounds like the functionalist description of the self, where you have an output and it doesn't really matter what happened inside, but you have an input. It doesn't really matter what happens inside, and then you have an output. So it's this chain of reactions.
I don't like the functionalist account of the self. So.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
No, I didn't know if you'd heard that from talking about it on the show before, and that was why you were trying to poke at me with this. And so yeah. So here's what I'll say about that. It is similar to a functionalist account of the self in that they are both objective accounts of the self rather than subjective. But on my view, I don't think that this is incompatible with there being a phenomenal self that exists and is part of these causal frameworks. So usually when people think of the functionalist account of the self, they think of an eliminativist functionalist account that says there is no, robust mental properties or something like that. There is literally just the input-output. My view is... sorry?
I just want to ask if you would then say that, in your opinion, the phenomenal consciousness has some form of causal power, or if it just is part of the... Okay.
Yes, I reject epiphenomenalism. I think that mental states or properties have some sort of causal impact, and
that's absolutely great. We agree on that.
Oh yeah, no, I totally think that's the case. My view is just the mental properties and states are just as much the result of luck as the physical properties and states, and so they are part of the causal chains. So your beliefs, for example, right? I think that your beliefs play an important role in how you act in your life, and they are mental states that you possess. But every belief you have is the result of luck. Everything that you've come to believe is the result of the luck of your education, the location that you were in, your dispositions with regard to like how much evidence you personally feel you need in order to believe a thing or not believe a thing. So yeah, I think the functionalist account is not a sufficient account if it's meant to replace or leave out the phenomenal side of things. But the phenomenal side of things are not indeterminate. They are part of the deterministic framework.
Okay.
I adopt lots of very weird positions and then try to mash them together, I suppose is the way to put this.
I don't think that it's really a weird position. I think actually that's what a lot of functionalists are lacking.
I mean, it comes with costs, is what I mean. There's always, like...
Sure, but which position doesn't?
Right, of course.
Except for trivialism.
Right, we could always be very trivialist about this. And, like...
I mean, do you know the epistemological position of trivialism?
Oh, no, what is that?
It's absolutely great, I love it. It's that every proposition is true.
Interesting.
So you can't really disagree with it because they will agree with you that it's wrong, but it's still true because it's not true.
Oh, this is the bit from Fiddler on the Roof where it's like, oh, you're right. Oh, and you're right too. Yeah, I know that joke.
Yeah, but it's a real position.
Yeah, I mean, real. I mean, I'm a Discordian. I think everything is true in some sense and false in some sense and meaningless in some sense. So,
and thanks for reminding me to read the Discordia Principia.
Oh yes, right. And so here's what one other thing I will say about like the kind of quietest, unresolvability side of all of this, that like, I don't think there's a solution here because I don't think that our sense of self is really reconcilable with the reality as we understand it. So I think the best thing to do is to try to jettison our sense of self and replace it with a more sophisticated framework that keeps front and center in our mind all of these how everything is the result of luck, because I don't think it changes our behavior in terms of things like humility and how we approach others when they've done things wrong. But it's always going to be an uneasy tension, because it's always going to be tricky to figure out how to reinforce people in acting in better ways. Because I like, another part of this, I do absolutely think that we should still change people's behavior and think that we can change people's behavior. And so the question is, how do we do that in a way that isn't too like horrifyingly dystopian, right? We still have to kind of respect their autonomy in sophisticated ways, even though, so one way to read what I'm saying would be to say that I've rejected the idea that humans have autonomy, but I don't think that's the case. I think that you have autonomy in a sense, in the sense of being able to hear arguments and adopt different beliefs as a result of those arguments. Now, whether or not you adopt them is the result of luck, but we should still respect individuals' freedom. We shouldn't try to brainwash you. We should try to convince you, is basically what I'm saying, that there are more or less coercive ways of approaching changing people's behavior. And the reality of moral luck does not give us sort of carte blanche to go around reprogramming people, because we're all programmed to begin with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I think if it's true, it would be really good for everyone to adopt the view.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really healthy. This is why I'm not sure if I actually believe it or not, but I really do think that the more I've internalized this view, the more I'm able to cope with bad things, the more
when certain people do certain things.
Yeah, the more I can forgive. And it's hard. Again, there's that unrelenting tension of like, I don't want this to become a view that means that no one is ever held responsible for anything in any way. I just think that we have to hold them responsible in the right way and with awareness of the factors that made them engage in that particular kind of behavior.
And also on the personal side, that someone should be happy if they do something that is something that they wanted to achieve. But
yeah, I'm a hedonist. Like, take pleasure, right? Like, you can't resist taking pleasure. So, like, take some pleasure in the world. And, like, I don't think that luck undermines that at all, right? Everything that I find pleasurable, I do as a result of luck, find it pleasurable. But I still find it pleasurable. Like, I still love having this conversation with you. And, like, if we're stuck here, you might as well do the things that are pleasurable up to a point, right? There's moral obligations that get in the way, and you shouldn't always just do what's pleasurable. Sure. So I think like none of this undermines the complexity of moral judgments and like all of the competing factors that go into making good moral decisions. In fact, I think it just makes it harder. I mean, it makes it more like you have to recognize that like you're going to spend your whole life wrestling with moral tensions, and it's going to be a matter of luck how well you actually do. And that means that I think that you can like let yourself off the hook a little bit more than some people do. I think it's, I think a lot of ethics comes down to correctives, that like if you are, if you have the luck of being the sort of person who lets yourself off the hook too much, do that less, right? And if you're the sort of person who beats yourself up for weeks on, and this is like why I became an ethicist, is because I'm the sort of person who like just kills myself over and over when I've done something even minorly wrong to someone. I just like it makes me crazy. And so like maybe I've adopted this as a corrective for letting myself off the hook a little bit more. We always joke that like philosophers are always telling you more about themselves than about the nature of the universe. So maybe I'm just confessing to everyone that I don't have free will, and maybe all of you do. So
yeah, but that wouldn't be really a problem, because in the end, as a solipsist, you
right, I'm the only one, so the rest of you are just figments of my not free imagination. That would actually
be horrible if you would be a solipsist who thinks that you are the only one who's determined.
I think you just described God. I think that's pretty much how God works.
Okay, great.
I do believe y'all are real, though, if it makes you feel any better.
Okay. When we are already talking about what's real and what not, I hope you're aware that I have reappropriated your lightning round.
I am, and I approve of this. All ideas are free for everyone.
And I modified it a bit. I tried to have less categories. In the end, I had more.
It's hard, right?
Absolutely, especially because I have a big interest in psychoanalysis, so I can't not ask certain things.
Every subset of every subset of the psychological mind. Is that how that works?
At least from the Lacanian perspective.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've caught this on the show, but I've started adding a question at the beginning that I'm finding to be very useful.
But I will not.
You're not going to ask that?
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Do you think that it primes them
too
much?
I think it's useful, but I don't like doing useful things.
I mean, I think there are trade-offs in doing, and I think it changes their answers, and maybe you want the answers to be different, or maybe you don't. So I think there's no moral fact of the matter about how to do the lightning round.
It's just luck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think every viewer is aware of how this works. Just basically, I will ask if something is real or not, and you will answer whether or not you think it's real or not, and you will not be able to explain what you mean by that.
Mm-hmm. And I promise that I've done no prep work in this. I'm shooting from the hip 100%
would have been hard, because some of them, I guess, you might not really have thought about before.
Here's open.
Is this the first time you have to suffer through this, or?
It is. This is a novel experience for me.
Absolutely great. I feel really honored.
Yeah, the torture implement is on the other foot.
Okay, so let's start. The first question would be: is the real real?
Is the real real? Yes, real.
Oh, okay. So, what about the symbolic order?
The symbolic.
Symbolic order.
Yeah, I think symbolic orders are real.
And the imaginary?
Yes.
Okay. Now a classic one, the external world?
Yes. Real.
Colors?
I want to say not real.
Okay. Phenomenal consciousness?
Real.
The self?
Not real.
Gender?
Not real.
Race?
Not real.
Species?
So I personally struggle with this line here. I'm gonna go with not real. Going not real.
Okay. Morality?
Real.
Moral luck?
Real, pervasive.
Rights.
Real.
Borders.
Borders. Not real.
Okay. Knowledge.
Real.
God, gods, or similar entities.
Not real.
Society.
Real.
And just to throw you off, silence.
Silence. Real. Yeah.
Okay. Fictional characters.
Part of me really does really just want to say real. Do I genuinely believe that they are real, though?
Yeah, I do.
I think I do. Yeah, sure, they're real.
Yeah, I do. Oh, great. Holes.
Holes are real.
Great. Chairs.
Chess, like the game chess?
Chair.
Oh, chairs. Excuse me, chairs. Chairs
that you're sitting in.
Yeah, chairs are not real.
Okay, desks.
Desks are also not real.
Sandwiches.
Sandwiches are not real. Definitely not real.
Okay. Science.
As far as I can tell, not... Well, I don't know if I think society is real. Yeah, I think science is real.
Okay. Beauty.
I'm just going to be wildly inconsistent and say that it's real, even though I said colors aren't real earlier. I'm doing it.
Okay. That does not have to be necessarily...
I know that it doesn't necessarily be inconsistent,
okay,
but my justifications for it are.
Yeah. Linear time.
Linear time. Oh, that's a hard one. I want to. I'll say not real.
Okay. The unconscious.
Real.
Okay. Unicorns.
Unicorns. As a subset of fictional characters, sure, yeah, real.
Causality.
Causality is real.
Nothingness.
Nothingness is real. Yeah.
Great. And the last one would be crows.
Crows. Not real.
Oh, now I'm sad.
Oh, I still like you in a conventional sense. I'm just talking like ultimately you're not real. But it's okay because ultimately I'm not real either. So like it's not a slight against you. It's we're on the same boat.
Yeah, but the problem is I'm now twice not real. So myself is not real and
I know,
me being a crow.
Sorry.
That's very problematic for me.
Yeah. But if it makes you feel better, like I was just clearly wildly inconsistent in my assessment. So like no one should take anything I say remotely seriously.
But would being two times not real not be like being real?
Oh yeah, like two
negatives
right,
canceling each other out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd buy that. Yeah, you could circle. It's like horseshoe theory. You circle all the way back around to being real.
Yeah. I'm so not real that I'm real again.
Yeah.
Horseshoe theory of ontology.
Yeah. Retro real.
Okay, great. That's it. Thank you for taking the time.
No problem. Thank you for having me on. I always love chatting about moral luck and how absurd reality is.
Okay. Man spricht generell über moralisches Glück, wenn jemand, der handelt, als moralischer Akteur bewertet wird, obwohl ein signifikanter Teil seines Handelns von Faktoren außerhalb seines Einflusses beeinflusst oder bewirkt wird. Dieser Umstand wirft die Frage auf, inwiefern man jemanden für sein Handeln bewerten kann und sollte. Je nachdem, wie ernst man das Thema moralisches Glück nimmt, ist niemand mehr als gut oder schlecht zu bewerten, da die Person nichts für das Handeln kann. Diese gesamte Argumentationslinie erinnert an Diskussionen über freien Willen und Determinismus. Wie in dieser Diskussion ist auch hier die Position eines harten moralischen Glücks schwer im eigenen Leben umzusetzen. Thomas Nagel hat in seinem einflussreichen Artikel über Moral Luck 4 Arten von moralischem Glück herausgearbeitet. Erstens, resultierendes Glück. Über resultierendes Glück spricht man, wenn alles außer dem Resultat der Handlung gleich ist, also die Intention, die Vorbereitung und so weiter. Und dieses Resultat Produkt von Glück ist. Zum Beispiel, wenn 2 Personen betrunken nach Hause fahren und einer von beiden bringt dadurch einen Menschen um. Wir sollten verstehen, dass es sich dabei nur um resultierendes Glück handelt und beide gleich bewerten. Zweitens, das den Umständen verschuldete Glück. Hierüber spricht man, wenn die äußeren Umstände das moralische Handeln signifikant beeinflussen. Ein Beispiel dafür sind die Menschen, die in Deutschland mit den herrschenden Nazis kollaborierten, es aber, wären sie vorher ausgewandert, nicht getan hätten. Wenn diese Unterscheidung im Verhalten auftauchen würde, haben wir es mit dem den Umständen verschuldeten Glück zu tun. Drittens, konstitutives Glück. Hierbei geht es darum, mit welchen Eigenschaften und Dispositionen jemand ins Leben kommt und aufwächst. Diese Art des moralischen Glücks ist insbesondere im politischen Kontext äußerst relevant, da man hierüber aus einem anderen Blickwinkel über Themen wie Umverteilung, Privilegien usw. diskutieren kann. Viertens, kausales Glück. Dabei geht es darum, wie jemand durch vorherige Umstände determiniert wurde. Für weitere Informationen, die tiefer gehen bezüglich dieses Themas und neue Einsichten und Kritik vorstellen, kann ich das Buch Moral Luck, editiert von Daniel Stedman, vorschlagen. Es beinhaltet sowohl die klassischen Essays als auch neuere zu diesem Thema. Ich hoffe, die Episode hat euch gefallen. Wenn ja, dann gebt doch eine Rückmeldung. Ansonsten wünsche ich euch noch einen schönen Tag. Tschüss.